Hello. My paper is titled The Economics of Truth Management. Despite the current ideal of sharing knowledge and information with everyone in the world, made possible by the process of globalization, truth remains a scarce resource. Postmodernism has instilled the idea of quantification of truth, speaking sometimes of no truth, but only interpretations, and other times of many truths. The success of postmodern enterprise has managed to insert even truth in the economy of ideas. The traditional talk of propaganda and the recent talk of post-truth serve to mark the economic career of truth. However, managing truth remains, as always, a challenge. And this challenge is made even more formidable by the fact that we are faced with the prospect of black swans, as the prominent economic thinker Nassim Taleb would have it. Now, let's start with propaganda. Bernays, in 1928, Edward Bernays, said that in almost every action in our daily lives, whether in a realm of politics or business, in our social behavior or ethical thinking, we are dominated by a relatively small number of people who understand the mental processes and social forms of the masses. They are the ones who pull the strings that control the public mind. He said that, as I said, in 1928 in his book on propaganda. As can be seen, since the beginning of the 20th century, serious studies of propaganda have begun, recognizing it a great weight in the functioning of human societies. Referring to its weight, it can be said that propaganda is not a simple concept. It more closely resembles the Hegelian concept, which, unfolding in time, produces history. However, history produced by propaganda is seen today as undesirable, bad, and anti-democratic. Propaganda helps keep autocratic, tyrannical, and oligarchic leaders in power, causes people to abandon thoughts, to replace them with impulses, habits, and emotions, pushes people towards the interests, desires, and needs that serve those in power, not themselves. Now, propaganda has had a remarkable career, and Bernays says that propaganda has not always been this cursed term as we see today. The word propaganda was first coined in 1622 when Pope Gregory the 15th, fearing the global spread of Protestantism, urgently proposed an addition to the Roman Curium, the office for the propagation of the faith, would oversee the Church's missionary efforts in the New World and elsewhere. They must consider and address any concerns about the spread of the faith throughout the world. That was its motto. Propaganda then started the semantic career as a term with a positive charge. It was such for the Catholic Church, becoming the irreplaceable means of spreading the religious faith according to Catholic teachings. And in fact, if we refer to the etymological meaning of the term in Latin, propagare means spreading, multiplication, distribution, while propaganda is what should be spreaded, multiplied, or distributed. Since what was to be spreaded, multiplied, and distributed was the Catholic faith, and since the latter was considered the true faith, then propaganda, substantively, was nothing but the truth. Spreading the truth not only could not be wrong, but it was necessary and ethically the right thing to do. The semantics of propaganda is obviously inextricably linked to the semantics of truth. Both of these concepts have undergone changes over time, such that they have radically transformed each other. In addition to interacting with the truth, the semantic career of propaganda has been decisively influenced by pragmatic considerations, such as the field of use of the term and the purpose for which it was used. Thus, by the end of the 18th century, the term propaganda began to be used in secular activities of civil society, business, and various associations. But in this usage, the term lost its positive charge, was freed from value, and became neutral. In the pragmatics of civil society, propaganda was no longer content, much less content of any truth that had to be spread, multiplied, and disseminated. It was transformed from content, propaganda, into means, propagare. Propaganda then was nothing but a means in function of content or goals determined by someone else, without necessarily having to do with the truth of the matter or with the good. Let us remember that civil society was already defined by Hegel as universal selfishness. Propaganda was therefore understood simply as a means to be used in the service of selfish interests and needs, where no group or individual could claim a monopoly of the truth or the good. Propaganda began to take on a negative connotation in the mid-19th century when it began to be used in the political arena. Above all, the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century, such as Nazism and communism, have contributed greatly to this. Infamous propagandists like Adolf Hitler, Joseph Goebbels, Leni Riefenstahl, Vladimir Lenin, Joseph Stalin, Fidel Castro have remained in our memory as great dictators. Propaganda was no longer the content of the truth. It was not merely a means that agreed to serve various ends in a neutral way. Propaganda was transformed again from means to content, from propaganda to propagare. But this time its content was the opposite of the truth. Propaganda became what was to be spread, multiplied, and distributed, precisely because it was a lie. This transformation of propaganda from means to content and its identification with lies is also confirmed by the experience of the peoples who lived in the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century. Thus, the Czechoslovak dissident Václav Havel, in his famous political essay, The Power of the Powerless, published in 1978, contrasted two lifestyles, living within falsehood and living within truth. According to Havel, individuals living in a totalitarian system are forced to live within a lie. There is no need for them to admit the lie. It is enough to have accepted their life with it and within it. Because with this fact, writes Havel, individuals confirm the system, fulfill the system, make the system, are the system. However, it would be wrong to think that propaganda is limited to the political realm only in totalitarian regimes or only dictatorial ones. Even liberal democracies are vulnerable and affected by propaganda. The conditions of possibility for the existence of propaganda in a democracy are related to the semantic transformation of the concept of truth. In philosophical theories of truth, three of them stand out. The first and oldest is the theory of correspondence. It begins with Aristotle and Aquinas and continues in the 20th century with Russell and Moore. According to this theory, truth is what corresponds to fact. Thus, thinking of reality as consisting of two levels, of words and things, truth remains to be the correspondence of words to things, of statements to facts. Things or facts have the irreplaceable role of providing words or statements. Second, there is the theory of coherence. It is associated with the names of the philosophers Blanchard and Joachim in the 20th century. According to this theory, the truth of a statement is related to its coherence with a specific set of other statements. Unlike the theory of correspondence, the conditions of the truth of our assertions are not found in the objective features of the world, but in other assertions. So, words or statements do not need to be substantiated by things or facts. Words or statements are verified by other words or statements, provided there is coherence between them. Third, there is the pragmatic theory. Important contributions to its formulation have been the philosophers James and Peirce. Both of these philosophers were guided by the principle that truth is satisfactory to be believed. This means that truth has practical value. True beliefs guarantee that they do not conflict with our experience. The pragmatic theory of truth does not enjoy complete independence from the other two theories. It has elements of correspondence as well as coherence, but not being purified, pragmatic theory is more elastic, more contextual, and more opportunistic. The most appropriate slogan for it would be, if it works, then it is true. Now we have the rise of post-truth that we speak about today. Well, how then do these theories relate to the already famous notion of our time, that is, post-truth? In the Oxford Dictionary we read, post-truth denotes or relates to circumstances where objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals of emotion and personal belief. First, it must be said that the very fact of formulating the concept of post-truth is evidence that truth, as a concept, has undergone radical transformations. More specifically, the birth of the concept of post-truth testifies to the great difficulty of telling the truth and sometimes even the impossibility of doing so. Let us remember that the question of possibility and the need to tell the truth began to be debated 2,500 years ago in ancient Greece, where Socrates was on the side of truth, while on the side of skepticism towards it and lack of the need to articulate it were the sophists. Back then, Socrates won the intellectual and moral battle. Today, 2,500 years later, the concept of post-truth is proof that the sophists have triumphed. How did this happen? For this, we must refer to Heidegger, who said that the history of Western civilization is, in essence, the history of Western metaphysics. Theories of truth, although they seem to have a natural place in the philosophical discipline of epistemology, are, first of all, dependent on the metaphysical conceptions of reality, of man, of nature, of society, and of God. The theory of correspondence, which presents truth as the correspondence of word to thing, of statement to fact, relied on a metaphysical conception that left no room for doubt of the reality known by the senses. Things and facts were, therefore, objective, and as such, they could become a solid foundation for judging the veracity of our statements. But all this changes with the passage of philosophy to its modern period. After Descartes, when philosophy became skeptical, and especially after Kant, when it becomes critical, one can no longer speak with absolute certainty about reality, things, and facts. Thus, Descartes poses the need for clear and distinct concepts, a task he places on reason, not the senses. While Kant forces the cognitive subject, the subject who seeks the truth of the world, to turn his gaze upon himself and to recognize his own capacities. The Kantian conclusion is that man can know only one aspect of reality, the phenomenal one, but reality in itself escapes him. From this, it can be concluded that facts, although objective, are only one dimension of reality, and that science, based on those facts, cannot tell us everything we need. This leaves open the way to produce and legitimize even non-scientific knowledge, for example, religious, mystical, artistic, and so on. It is important to understand that after Kant, truth can no longer be a correspondence of statement to fact, as the latter has been dissolved or relativized in its own weight. It was probably no coincidence that right after Kant, on the philosophical scene came Hegel, who set up an extraordinary philosophical system when every statement was in coherence with others and therefore could be regarded as true. But even the Hegelian coherence would receive powerful blows. First Kierkegaard and then Nietzsche attacked the idea of systematic knowledge, setting as ideal the anti-system and the uninterrupted flux. This trend continued in the 20th century with philosophers such as Foucault and Deleuze. The American pragmatism of James and Peirce, though it cannot be said to have arisen from the ideas of the aforementioned continental philosophers, was metaphysically enabled by the blows to the system of Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, and was metaphysically followed by Foucault and Deleuze. It is interesting to note that the pragmatic slogan, "If it works, then it is true," finds significant resonance in Foucault's relationship between power and knowledge. Nietzsche also said that there are no truths but only interpretations. Post-truth, then, can be seen epistemologically as the offspring of Jamesian and Peircean pragmatism, and metaphysically as the offspring of Kierkegaardian, Nietzschean, Foucaultian, and Deleuzian anti-systemism. It is these thinkers, but also others in their line, who contributed to the production of the conditions of possibility for the post-truth phenomenon. Post-truth is the abandonment of facts and reason. Those who use post-truth are using a form of persuasion that appeals to emotions and personal belief. As such, post-truth can be identified with propaganda. Propaganda, writes Robert Gula, in its broadest sense, is merely a form of persuasion, a form that appeals to our emotions instead of reason. Now that we find post-truth naturally housed in liberal democracies, from Trump's America to Rama's Albania, we must keep in mind the expression of Goebbels, the infamous minister of propaganda during the Nazi regime in Germany, who said, "It will always remain one of the saltiest jokes about democracy that it gave its deadly enemies the tools that destroyed it." Thank you.